Hello friends, in this video, I will tell you some interesting and at the same time scary stories related to Airbnb. If you like the video, you can subscribe to the channel. Thus, you will help a lot to promote the channel. Thank you. In 2015, there was a tragic shooting in California at a house that had been rented through Airbnb. 5 people were killed in the incident, including the owner of the house, who himself had rented his home through the service. The owner of the house was Mark Wilson, a 45-year-old software engineer who worked for a large tech company in San Francisco. He had bought the house in Oakland a few years ago, hoping to settle down and start a family. However, his plans were shattered when his wife left him for another man and took their daughter with her. Mark was devastated and depressed and decided to rent out his house on Airbnb to earn some extra money and distract himself from his loneliness. One of the guests who rented Mark's house was Jessica Lee, a 21-year-old college student who wanted to celebrate her birthday with her friends. She had found the house on Airbnb and thought it was perfect for her party. It was spacious, modern, and had a pool and a hot tub. She invited about 20 people to join her, including her boyfriend Ryan, her best friend Ashley, and her cousin Kevin. The party started around 8 p.m. on a Friday night. Jessica and her friends were having a great time, drinking, dancing, and playing games. They turned up the music loud and didn't care about anything else. They didn't notice that their noise was bothering the neighbors who lived in a quiet residential area. The neighbors were an elderly couple named Frank and Helen Jones. They had lived in their house for over 30 years and were used to peace and quiet. They were annoyed by the loud music and the voices coming from Mark's house. They tried to call him several times, but he didn't answer his phone. He was at work, unaware of what was happening at his house. The Joneses decided to call the police and complain about the disturbance. The police arrived at Mark's house around 10 p.m. They knocked on the door and asked Jessica to turn down the music and end the party. Jessica was drunk and defiant. She refused to comply and slammed the door in their face. She told her friends that they didn't have to listen to anyone and that they could do whatever they wanted. She encouraged them to keep partying and ignore the police. The police were not amused by Jessica's attitude. They decided to enter the house by force and arrest her for disorderly conduct. They broke down the door and stormed into the living room, where most of the guests were gathered. The guests panicked and tried to escape or hide. Some of them ran upstairs, some of them jumped out of the windows, some of them hid in closets or bathrooms. Among the guests who ran upstairs was Kevin, Jessica's cousin. He was carrying a gun that he had brought with him for protection. He didn't trust anyone and always felt insecure. He had a history of drug abuse and mental illness. He thought that the police were after him and that they wanted to kill him. He ran into Mark's bedroom and locked the door behind him. Mark was in his bedroom when Kevin barged in. He had just come home from work and was shocked to see his house full of strangers. He had no idea that Jessica had rented his house for a party. He tried to call Airbnb customer service, but they were closed for the night. He decided to go downstairs and confront Jessica. But before he could do that, he heard gunshots. The shots were fired by Kevin, who had barricaded himself in the bedroom and was now shooting at the police who were trying to enter the room. Mark was caught in the crossfire and was hit by a bullet. He collapsed on the floor and died instantly. The police eventually managed to subdue Kevin and arrest him. He was charged with multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, and assault with a deadly weapon. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The incident shocked the Airbnb community and raised serious concerns about safety and security. It prompted Airbnb to introduce new safety measures and screening procedures for hosts and guests, as well as a 24/7 customer support hotline for emergencies. The tragedy also had a profound impact on Mark's family and friends. They were devastated by his sudden and senseless death. They organized a memorial service for him, and set up a scholarship fund in his name to support young software engineers who share his passion for innovation and creativity. Mark's legacy lives on, and his death serves as a reminder of the importance of safety and responsibility in a sharing economy. In 2023, in Vancouver, Canada, a woman named Olivia decided to book an apartment through Airbnb for a weekend getaway. She was looking for a cozy and affordable place near the downtown area, where she could relax and explore the city. She found a listing that seemed perfect for her. A one-bedroom apartment with a balcony, a kitchen, and a fireplace. The host, David, had good reviews and verified his identity. Olivia contacted him, and he agreed to rent her the place for 2 nights. Olivia arrived at the apartment on Friday evening, after taking a flight from Toronto. She followed David's instructions to access the key from a lockbox and entered the apartment. She was impressed by how clean and comfortable it was. She unpacked her suitcase, took a shower, and ordered some pizza. She turned on the fireplace and watched some Netflix on the couch. She felt happy and relaxed. She went to bed around 11 p.m. after locking the door and setting the alarm on her phone. She fell asleep quickly, feeling safe and secure. However, around 2 a.m., she was awakened by a loud noise. She heard someone banging on the door and shouting. She got up from the bed and looked through the peephole. She saw 2 men wearing masks and holding crowbars. They were trying to break into her apartment. She panicked and grabbed her phone. She dialed 911 and whispered that she needed help. She told them her address and that 2 men were trying to break into her Airbnb. She hoped that they would arrive soon. She ran to the bathroom and locked herself inside. She heard the door being smashed open and the men entering the apartment. They were yelling and cursing. They searched the place for valuables and found her laptop, her purse, and her jewelry. They also found her suitcase and opened it. "Hey, look what we have here," one of them said. "A pretty little guest. Let's have some fun with her," the other one said. They kicked the bathroom door and tried to force it open. Olivia screamed and pushed against it with all her strength. She prayed that someone would hear her and come to her rescue. Finally, she heard a loud knocking on the front door. She heard a male voice yelling, "Police. Open up." The 2 men cursed and ran out of the apartment, taking Olivia's belongings with them. Olivia heard the sound of footsteps and saw the bathroom door opening. A police officer entered, followed by 2 more officers. They looked at her with concern and asked if she was okay. Olivia burst into tears and hugged the officer who had rescued her. She told them what had happened and showed them the broken door and the stolen items. They took her statement and called for an ambulance to examine her for any injuries. They also contacted the Airbnb host, David, and informed him of the incident. David arrived at the apartment an hour later, looking shocked and apologetic. He explained that he had no idea that something like this could happen, and that he had never had any problems with his guests before. He offered to refund Olivia's payment and pay for her damages and losses. He also promised to improve the security measures in his apartment and to cooperate fully with the police investigation. Olivia was grateful for the support she received from the police and Airbnb. However, she was traumatized by the incident and felt unsafe in the city. She decided to cut her trip short and return home to Toronto. She also filed a complaint against the 2 men who had attacked her and hoped that justice would be served. She learned a valuable lesson about the risks of using Airbnb and the importance of taking precautions when traveling alone. In 2020, in a small town in Canada, a young couple decided to spend their anniversary in a cozy cabin in the woods. They found the perfect place on Airbnb, a rustic log house with a fireplace and a hot tub. They booked it for a weekend and drove there on a Friday evening. They were greeted by the friendly host, who showed them around the cabin and gave them some tips on what to do in the area. He seemed very nice and helpful, and they thanked him for his hospitality. He left them with the keys and said he would be back on Sunday to check them out. The couple unpacked their bags and settled in. They enjoyed a romantic dinner by the fire and then decided to relax in the hot tub. They put on their bathing suits and went outside. They didn't notice the small black device that was hidden behind a plant on the porch. The device was a wireless camera that was connected to the host's phone. He had installed it earlier that day when he was preparing the cabin for his guests. He had done this many times before with other unsuspecting visitors. He even recorded them and sold the videos online. He was watching them now as they got into the hot tub. He zoomed in on their faces and bodies, admiring their beauty. He felt a surge of excitement and satisfaction. He thought he was very clever and lucky to have such a hobby. He didn't know that his luck was about to run out. The next morning, the couple woke up feeling refreshed and happy. They decided to go for a hike in the woods and explore the nature. They put on their clothes and shoes and grabbed their backpacks. They also took their phones with them, as they wanted to take some pictures of the scenery. They locked the cabin door and walked away. They didn't notice the small red light that was blinking on the camera. The light meant that the camera had run out of battery and had stopped working. It also meant that it had stopped sending signals to the host's phone. The host was still in his own house, about an hour away from the cabin. He had been watching his guests all night, until he fell asleep on his couch. He woke up around noon and checked his phone. He saw that the camera was offline. He panicked. He thought that maybe his guests had found the camera and removed it. He thought that maybe they had called the police or both. He thought that maybe he was in big trouble. He quickly got dressed and got into his car. He drove as fast as he could to the cabin, hoping to get there before anyone else did. He didn't know that he was too late. The couple had been hiking for about 2 hours when they came across a ranger station. They decided to stop there and ask for some directions and recommendations. They entered the building and saw a man sitting behind a desk. He smiled at them and said hello. He asked them where they were staying and what they were doing. They told him that they were staying at a cabin they had rented through Airbnb and that they were celebrating their anniversary. The man nodded and said that he knew the place. He said that it was a nice cabin, but that he had heard some rumors about it. They asked him what kind of rumors. He said that he had heard that some people who had stayed there before had complained about finding hidden cameras in their rooms. They gasped. They felt a chill down their spines. They asked him if he was serious. He said that he was. He said that he had seen some reports online from people who had posted pictures of the cameras they had found. He said that he had also heard from some colleagues that there had been some investigations going on, but that nothing had been confirmed yet. He asked them if they had noticed anything suspicious in their cabin. They said that they hadn't, but that they wanted to check again. He said that he understood, and that he would help them if they needed anything. He gave them his phone number and told them to call him if they found anything or if they felt unsafe. They thanked him and left the station. They felt scared and angry. They decided to go back to the cabin as soon as possible and look for any signs of cameras or other devices. They also decided to call Airbnb and report their situation. One of the agents who worked at the ranger station was a woman named Lisa. She was a specialist in cybercrime and had been tracking down a network of online predators who were using hidden cameras to spy on and blackmail their victims. She had been following the trail of one of the suspects for months and had finally managed to trace his location to a small town in Canada. She had also discovered that he was using Airbnb to rent out his cabin to unsuspecting guests, and that he had installed cameras in every room. She had contacted Airbnb and obtained the information of his current guests, a young couple who had arrived the previous night. She had also contacted her local partner, a man named Mike, who was a sheriff in the town. She had told him everything she knew and asked him to meet her at the cabin as soon as possible. She had also asked him to bring a warrant and some backup, just in case. She had left the ranger station shortly after the couple had left and had driven to the cabin. She had arrived there before them and had parked her car behind some trees. Mike had arrived a few minutes later with two other deputies. They had greeted each other and exchanged some information. They had agreed on a plan. They had decided to wait for the couple to return and then approach them. They had decided to explain who they were and what they were doing there. They had decided to ask them for their permission to search the cabin and look for any evidence of cameras or other devices. They had decided to assure them that they were not in any trouble and that they were there to help them. They had also decided to be ready for anything in case the suspect showed up. They didn't know that he was already there. The suspect had arrived at the cabin shortly after Lisa and Mike. He had seen their cars parked behind some trees and had realized that something was wrong. He had parked his car on the other side of the road and had sneaked into the cabin through a back door. He had grabbed his laptop and his phone and had tried to erase any traces of his activities. He had also tried to remove any cameras or other devices that he could find. He didn't know that it was too late. Lisa and Mike had already hacked into his laptop and his phone and had accessed all his files and messages. They had already found all his videos and photos of his victims, including the couple who were staying in the cabin. They had already identified him as one of the leaders of the online predator network. They were about to arrest him. In the year 2022, John Martinez lived in Miami. He was a tall young man with short cropped dark hair and deep brown eyes. He worked as a software developer for a local technology company and spent most of his day at his computer. His job was stressful, but he loved what he did and was grateful for the opportunity to work for such a company. One morning, John woke up to the sound of an alarm clock. He turned it on several times before finally getting out of bed. He knew he was going to have a long day at the office today, but he didn't expect it to be one of the hardest days of his life. There had been a lot of thefts in his neighborhood lately, and that worried John. He closed all the doors and windows before he went out to work, but he still couldn't shake the feeling of unease. At the office, his boss, Maria Rodriguez, called him into her office. Maria was a strict but fair boss who always put John to the ultimate test. She was impressed with his recent work and offered him a promotion to senior developer. John was excited about the opportunity, but he knew it would mean more responsibility and longer work hours. He would have to prove his worth to keep his job. Later that day, as John was walking home from work, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw a man in a hoodie and sunglasses following him. John's heart beat faster as he quickened his steps, trying to run away from the stranger, but the man was persistent and kept following him. Soon John heard a noise behind him and turned around to see what was going on. He saw that the stranger was only a few feet away and was holding a gun. John was frightened and trying to run, but the stranger was faster and caught up with him. He hit John over the head and he lost consciousness. When John came to, he was in a strange room, tied up and weak. He realized he had been kidnapped and lost track of his time in captivity. His captors had not communicated any demands, and John feared they were going to kill him. He tried to free himself, but his bonds were too tight. Eventually, after several days in captivity, John was rescued by the police, who raided a suspicious location. His captors were arrested, and he was taken to the hospital for treatment. After this incident, John decided that he needed to be more vigilant and careful when he was outside. He also promised that he would never neglect his safety again, and would take every precaution to protect himself from possible threats. Layla had always wanted to visit San Francisco. She was a freelance graphic designer working remotely from her laptop. She decided to take a month off to explore her dream city. Through Airbnb, she booked a cozy room in a Victorian house. The hostess, Rachel, was a friendly and helpful woman who gave her tips on where to go and what to see. Layla enjoyed her stay in San Francisco. She visited the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz Island, Chinatown, Fisherman's Wharf, and many other attractions. She also met some interesting people along the way. She befriended a group of artists who invited her to their studio. She had a date with a charming guy who took her to a jazz club. She even got a cable car tattoo on her ankle. On her last night in San Francisco, Layla decided to treat herself to dinner at a fancy restaurant. She put on her favorite dress and put on some jewelry. She hailed a cab and asked the driver to take her to the restaurant. She anticipated delicious food and possibly wine. She arrived at the restaurant and was greeted by the hostess. Layla gave her name and asked for a reservation. The hostess checked the list and frowned. "I'm sorry, Mom, but we don't have a reservation under your name," she said. Layla felt confused. She was sure she had booked a room online. Layla showed the hostess the reservation confirmation email on her phone. The hostess looked at it and shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mom, but that's not our email address. It's a scam. Someone must have hacked into our website and sent you this fake confirmation." Layla was shocked and angry. She had been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. She had spent a lot of money on it. And now she was told it was all a lie. Layla asked the hostess if there was any way she could get a table. The hostess apologized and said they were fully booked for the evening. Layla felt defeated. She left the restaurant and walked back to the cab. She asked the driver to take her back to the Airbnb. She drove up to the house and paid the driver. Layla climbed the stairs and opened the door to her room. She went in and closed the door behind her. Layla felt tired and sad. She decided to take a shower and go to bed early. She hoped that tomorrow would be better. Layla undressed and wrapped herself in a towel. She went to the bathroom and turned on the shower. She stepped inside and let the warm water wash over her. Layla tried to forget about the bad experience of the restaurant. She tried to focus on the positive things that had happened during her trip. Layla tried to relax. She finished her shower and turned off the water. Layla wiped herself with another towel and wrapped it around her hair. She walked out of the bathroom and into her room. She gasped when she saw what was waiting for her. There was a man in her room. He was wearing a ski mask and gloves. He had a crowbar in his hand. He broke the window and climbed in. When he saw Lilia, he smiled wickedly. "Hello, beautiful," he said. Layla felt terrorized. She tried to back away, but the man grabbed her by the arm and pulled her towards him. He demanded that she give him all of her valuables. Layla didn't resist. She handed over her jewelry and wallet. But the man didn't stop there. He started to beat her viciously. Layla felt pain all over her body. She screamed for help, but nobody heard her. The man finally stopped and ran away with her belongings. Layla lay on the floor bruised. She felt helpless and alone. She wondered why this had happened to her. Eventually, she managed to crawl to her phone and call the police. They arrived quickly and took her to the hospital. The doctors treated her injuries and gave her painkillers. Layla had to stay in the hospital for a few days. She felt traumatized by the attack. She couldn't believe that her dream trip had ended like this. Eventually, she was well enough to travel home. Layla returned to her apartment and tried to get her life back on track. She was grateful to be alive, but she couldn't forget what had happened to her in San Francisco. Although Layla's trip to San Francisco had ended in tragedy, she'd found a way to turn it into something positive. She was determined to make a difference and help others in need. My peaceful neighborhood had always been a place where nothing ever seemed to happen. It was the type of place where people felt safe enough to leave their doors unlocked at night. But that sense of security was shattered one fateful night when a violent incident took place that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my community. It was around midnight when I was jolted awake by the sound of frantic screams coming from the hallway of my apartment building. At first, I thought it was just a nightmare, but the noise persisted, and I knew that something was seriously wrong. I quickly got out of bed and made my way to the door to see what was going on. As I opened the door, I was confronted with a gruesome sight. A woman covered in blood was slumped against the wall, gasping for air. My neighbor was holding another woman against the wall, screaming at her incoherently. It was clear that something terrible had happened, and I knew that I had to act quickly. I immediately called 911 and rushed to help the injured woman. She was bleeding profusely from a deep wound on her neck, and I could tell that she was in critical condition. With trembling hands, I applied pressure to the wound and tried to keep her calm while we waited for the paramedics to arrive. Meanwhile, my neighbor continued to rage at the other woman. He was accusing her of pushing his cat and seemed completely unhinged. I tried to reason with him, but he was too consumed by his anger to listen. As we waited for help to arrive, I couldn't help but wonder what had led to this violent outburst. I had known my neighbor for 6 years, and he had always seemed like a friendly and mild-mannered person. But now, seeing him in this state, I realized that I had never truly known him at all. When the police and paramedics finally arrived, they quickly took control of the situation. The injured woman was rushed to the hospital, where she underwent emergency surgery. The other woman was taken into custody for her own safety, and my neighbor was arrested and charged with aggravated assault. In the days that followed, I learned more about what had happened that night. The woman who had been attacked was a guest at an Airbnb rental in the building. She had been returning from a night out when she encountered my neighbor in the hallway. He had accused her of pushing his cat and had attacked her with a knife. The incident shocked the community and made headlines in the local news. Airbnb released a statement condemning the violence and promising to do everything they could to support their guests. Meanwhile, my neighbor's mugshot was splashed across the front page of the newspaper, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. As the weeks went by, I tried my best to move on from the incident, but then one day I received a call from the police. They wanted to know if I had noticed anything strange about my neighbor's behavior in the weeks leading up to the attack. At first, I told them that I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. But as I thought back on the days and weeks before the incident, I began to remember small details that now seemed suspicious. My neighbor had been acting strangely, and I had dismissed it as stress from work or personal issues. When the trial finally came around, I was called to testify in court. It was a nerve-wracking experience, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as I took the stand. But as I recounted the events of that night, I felt a newfound sense of clarity. I realized that my neighbor had been wearing a mask all along, and that the person I thought I knew was nothing more than an illusion. My friend Sarah and I had always been skeptical about Airbnb, but our other friend Rachel convinced us to give it a try. She had used the platform many times and always had good experiences. So when we planned a weekend trip to Miami, we decided to book an Airbnb in South Beach. The listing had excellent reviews and the price was unbeatable, so we didn't think twice before booking it. The pictures showed a beautiful and spacious apartment with all the amenities we needed. We were excited to explore the city and have a comfortable place to come back to at night. When we arrived at the apartment, everything seemed normal. The host had left the keys in a lockbox, and we entered without any trouble. The apartment was clean and exactly like the pictures. We dropped our bags and decided to grab dinner before heading out to see the sights. After dinner, we came back to the apartment to relax before going to bed. Sarah and Rachel went to the living room, and I decided to take a shower. As soon as I entered the bathroom, I felt uneasy. I looked up and saw a sprinkler system, but something about it felt off. Then I noticed a tiny camera lens staring back at me. I froze. My heart raced, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I quickly got dressed and went to check the other rooms, and that's when I found even more hidden cameras. There were cameras in the living room, kitchen, and bedroom. We were being monitored 24/7. Sarah and Rachel were shocked when I told them what I had found. We couldn't believe that someone had invaded our privacy like this. We immediately called the host, but they didn't answer. We didn't feel safe in the apartment and knew we had to leave. We contacted Airbnb and reported the incident to the police. The company offered to refund our money and find us another place to stay, but we declined. We didn't trust anyone anymore. The police arrived and searched the apartment. They found a sophisticated camera system that had been hidden in the apartment's ceiling, walls, and furniture. They also found that the host had been broadcasting the footage to a website where people could pay to watch. The host was arrested, and we later found out that they had done this to several other Airbnb guests. It was a terrifying experience, and we felt violated and traumatized. We wondered who had been monitoring us and what they had done with the footage they had captured. Although the incident left us feeling violated, we were grateful that we were able to get out of the situation before things got any worse. We hope that by sharing our story, others will be more aware and cautious when booking their own Airbnb experiences. We want to prevent anyone else from going through what we did. We also learned to always do a thorough search of the rental property and read the reviews carefully before booking. The group of friends consisted of 5 people: Anna, Juan, Sofia, Marcos, and Laura. They had been close friends since their childhood years and were now in their late 20s. Anna was a teacher, Juan worked in a bank, Sofia was a freelance writer, Marcos was a lawyer, and Laura was a software engineer. They had planned a weekend getaway to a luxurious villa in the picturesque countryside of Italy. The villa was nestled in the rolling hills of Tuscany and offered stunning views of the surrounding vineyards and olive groves. The group arrived on a Friday evening, and after settling into their rooms, they spent the night playing games, sipping wine, and chatting about their lives. The next morning, they woke up early and set out to explore the nearby town. They visited a quaint market, savored delicious Italian cuisine at a local trattoria, and strolled through the winding alleys of the town. They returned to the villa in the late afternoon, feeling refreshed and rejuvenated. However, their tranquility was short-lived. As they approached the villa, they noticed that the front door was open. They initially dismissed it as carelessness and continued inside. But as they walked through the hallway, they realized that something was amiss. The living room was in disarray, and it was evident that someone had ransacked the place. Suddenly, they'd heard footsteps coming from the upper floor. They froze, and their hearts pounded in their chests. They knew that something was terribly wrong. As the footsteps grew louder, they heard glass breaking, and they realized that they were not alone in the villa. The group quickly made their way to the kitchen and barricaded themselves inside. But it was too late. 2 masked men, wielding knives, barged into the kitchen and attacked them. A fierce struggle ensued, and the group fought back with all their might. Anna, the smallest of the group, managed to dodge the attackers and run outside, but she was soon caught by the gang. The attackers then dragged Anna to their car, leaving the rest of the group injured and traumatized. They threatened to harm Anna if their demands were not met. The group immediately called the police, who arrived promptly on the scene. But by the time they reached the villa, the gang had fled with Anna. The group was left reeling from the traumatic experience. They later learned that the attackers were part of a notorious criminal gang that had been operating in the area for years. They would target wealthy tourists, break into their villas, and kidnap them for ransom. The group was fortunate to have survived the attack, but they were left with deep physical and emotional scars. The police launched a massive manhunt for the gang, and after a few days of intense search, they managed to track them down. A daring rescue mission ensued, and Anna was eventually freed from the clutches of the kidnappers. The group never forgot the ordeal they had gone through, and they made a solemn vow never to take their safety for granted again. They pledged to always be vigilant and take extra precautions when traveling. Although they continued to remain close friends, they never spoke of that fateful weekend again. It remained a painful memory that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In 2019, in Los Angeles, California, a young couple named Jake and Mia decided to spend a weekend getaway in a cozy apartment they found on Airbnb. They had been dating for 6 months and wanted to celebrate their anniversary in style. They chose a place that looked charming and affordable, located in a quiet neighborhood near the Hollywood Hills. They were excited to explore the city and enjoy some quality time together. They arrived on Friday evening and checked in with the host, who greeted them warmly and showed them around. The apartment was spacious and well furnished, with a comfortable living room, a fully equipped kitchen, a large bedroom, and a balcony with a view of the hills. The host told them that they could use anything they wanted and that he would be available if they needed anything. He also gave them some tips on where to go and what to see in the area. He seemed friendly and helpful, and Jake and Mia thanked him for his hospitality. They unpacked their bags and settled in, feeling happy and relaxed. They decided to order some pizza and watch a movie on the couch, cuddling and kissing. They felt like they had found the perfect place for their romantic getaway. The next morning, they woke up early and made breakfast together. They planned to go hiking in the hills and then visit some famous landmarks in Hollywood. They dressed up casually and grabbed their backpacks, ready to have some fun. They locked the door behind them and walked down the stairs to the parking lot where they had left their car. As they were about to get in, they heard a loud bang behind them. They turned around and saw a man wearing a ski mask and holding a gun. He had just shot at the door of the apartment they had rented. He saw them and pointed the gun at them, shouting, "Give me your money and your keys." Jake and Mia were shocked and terrified. They didn't know what to do. They had no idea who this man was or why he was attacking them. They wondered if he was the host or someone else who knew about the apartment. They wondered if this was a robbery or something worse. Jake tried to stay calm and protect Mia. He said, "Please don't shoot. We don't have much money, but you can take it. Just don't hurt us." The man didn't listen. He fired another shot at them, hitting Jake in the chest. Jake fell to the ground, bleeding profusely. Mia screamed and ran to him, trying to stop the bleeding. The man approached them and grabbed her by the hair, driving her away from Jake. Mia was in shock and didn't know what to do. She was scared for her life and for Jake's life. She begged the man to let them go and to call an ambulance for Jake. The man ignored her pleas and forced her into the car, driving away from the scene of the crime. Jake was left alone, bleeding and unconscious. He was found by a passerby who called the police and an ambulance. He was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, he didn't make it. He died from his injuries, leaving Mia devastated and traumatized. The police investigated the crime and discovered that the apartment they had rented on Airbnb was actually a fake listing. The host was a scam artist who had created a fake profile and a fake apartment to lure unsuspecting guests into his trap. He had rented out the apartment to multiple guests and had used it as a base for his criminal activities. The man who had shot Jake and kidnapped Mia was later identified and arrested. He was a known criminal with a history of violence and robbery. He had targeted the apartment because he knew it was a fake listing and that the guests would be vulnerable. The incident shook the Airbnb community and raised concerns about the safety and security of guests. Airbnb pledged to improve its safety measures and to screen its hosts and listings more thoroughly. They also offered support and compensation to Jake's family and to Mia, who was left traumatized by the incident. In 2020 in France, a young journalist named Julien was looking for a place to stay in Paris for a few days. He had been assigned to cover a major political scandal involving the president and his mistress. He wanted to be close to the action and get exclusive interviews with the sources. He decided to rent an apartment through Airbnb, a popular online platform that connects travelers with hosts who offer their homes for short-term stays. He found a cozy studio in the heart of the city, near the Eiffel Tower and the Champs-Élysées. The host was a middle-aged man named Pierre, who claimed to be an artist and a traveler. He had good reviews from previous guests and offered a reasonable price. Julian booked the apartment and received a confirmation message from Pierre, who welcomed him and gave him the address and the code to enter the building. Julian arrived in Paris on a sunny afternoon and took a taxi to the apartment. He entered the code and climbed up the stairs to the 5th floor. He knocked on the door and waited for Pierre to open it. He heard some noises inside, but no one answered. He tried calling Pierre's phone number, but it was switched off. He wondered if Pierre had forgotten about his arrival or if he was running late. He decided to wait outside for a while and see if Pierre would show up. He sat on the stairs and checked his email. He had received a message from his editor, who urged him to hurry up and get some scoops on the scandal. He also had an email from his girlfriend, who wished him good luck and said she missed him. He replied to both messages and then looked at his watch. It had been half an hour since he arrived at the apartment. He was getting impatient and annoyed. He thought about looking for another place to stay, but he didn't want to waste time and money. He decided to try the door again, hoping that Pierre had left it unlocked for him. He turned the knob and pushed the door. To his surprise, it opened. He stepped inside and saw a small but tidy studio with a bed, a couch, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. There were paintings on the walls and books on the shelves. It looked like a nice place to stay, except for one thing: there was blood on the floor. Julian gasped and felt a chill run down his spine. He looked around and saw more blood on the couch and on the windowsill. He wondered what had happened here and where Pierre was. He felt a sudden fear that someone might still be in the apartment and might attack him. He reached for his phone and dialed 911. He told the operator that he had rented an apartment through Airbnb and that he had found blood inside. He gave them the address and asked them to send help as soon as possible. He hung up and backed away from the door. He wanted to get out of there as fast as he could, but he also wanted to see if there was anyone who needed help or if there was any clue to what had happened. He walked cautiously towards the window and looked outside. He saw a crowd of people on the street below, pointing at something on the pavement. He leaned over and saw what they were looking at: a body. It was Pierre. He had fallen from the window on the 5th floor and landed on the sidewalk with a thud. His face was smashed beyond recognition. Julian felt sick and dizzy. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had rented an apartment from a man who had been murdered. He wondered if he had walked into a crime scene and contaminated it. He wondered if he was in danger. He heard sirens approaching and footsteps coming up the stairs. He turned around and saw 2 police officers entering the apartment, guns drawn. They shouted at him to raise his hands and identify himself. He complied and told them that he was a journalist and that he had rented the apartment through Airbnb. The officers searched him and his belongings and asked him to explain why he was there. He told them what had happened and showed them the blood on the floor and the body outside. He also gave them Pierre's name and phone number. The officers listened to him and then took him to the police station for questioning. They told him that he was a witness in a murder case and that he had to cooperate with them. Julian felt scared and confused. He had never been in a police station before and didn't know what to expect. He spent the next few hours answering questions, providing his personal details, and giving his account of what had happened. He also contacted his editor and his girlfriend and told them that he had been caught up in a tragedy. He learned from the police that Pierre had been pushed out of the window by a robber who had stolen his money and his belongings. They had identified the suspect through CCTV footage and had apprehended him. They had also found a weapon and some drugs on him. He was a known criminal who had been on the run for months. Julian felt relieved that the killer had been caught, but also sad that Pierre had died. He had never met him in person, but had exchanged messages with him and had felt a connection to him as a fellow traveler and artist. He decided to write an article about his experience and to honor Pierre's memory. He wanted to expose the dangers of renting an apartment through Airbnb and to raise awareness of the risks that travelers face. He also wanted to pay tribute to Pierre's life and work, and to show that even in death, he had inspired someone to create something meaningful. Julien left Paris a few days later, feeling a mix of emotions. He had witnessed a horrific event, but had also learned a valuable lesson. He had seen the best and the worst of humanity, and had realized that life is fragile and unpredictable. He had a story to tell and a mission to fulfill. He had become a journalist not by choice but by fate, and he had embraced it with courage and compassion. In 2016 in California, 2 people booked a house through Airbnb and threw a party. During the party, they got into a fight, which left one of the guests disabled. Airbnb was criticized for not paying enough attention to the safety of its guests. The story begins with Taylor and Chambers, 2 friends who wanted to party on Halloween night. They searched the internet for places to rent and found an ad on Airbnb for a large house for sale in Orinda, a town east of Berkeley in the San Francisco Bay Area. The ad said no parties were allowed, but Taylor and Chambers ignored that and booked the house anyway. They invited their friends and posted the party announcement on social media, promising music, drinks, and costumes. They also charged an admission fee of $20 per person. Soon more than 100 people showed up at the house, some of whom Taylor and Chambers did not know. The party was noisy and chaotic, with people drinking, dancing, and smoking. Neighbors complained about the noise and called the police several times. Police arrived at the house around 10:45 p.m., but did not enter because they did not have a warrant and saw no illegal activity. Meanwhile, an argument broke out inside the house between 2 groups of guests. One group accused the other of stealing their belongings from the bedroom. The argument escalated into a physical fight, and someone pulled out a gun and started shooting. The gunshots caused panic and chaos among the party guests, who tried to leave the house. Some ran outside, others hid in closets and bathrooms. Police heard gunshots and rushed into the house. They found 4 people dead and several more wounded. One of the wounded later died in the hospital. One of the victims was Chambers, who was shot in the spine and paralyzed from the waist down. He survived, but his life was changed forever. He blamed Taylor for inviting him to the party and putting him in danger. He also blamed Airbnb for allowing such parties. Chambers and the other victims sued the shooters and also sued Taylor, Airbnb, and the owners of the house for negligence and failing to provide adequate security. The case went to trial, and after several weeks of hearings and testimonies, the jury found Taylor, Airbnb, and the house owners liable for the damages caused by the shooting. The judge ordered Taylor and Airbnb to pay millions of dollars in compensation to the victims and their families. Airbnb was also required to implement stricter policies to prevent unauthorized parties from being held in its rentals. Taylor and the shooter were also charged with assault with a deadly weapon and other felonies. They were convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The tragedy in Orinda shook the Airbnb community and raised concerns about the safety of short-term rentals. Airbnb vowed to take more aggressive measures to prevent unauthorized parties, including banning certain types of events, increasing the number of customer support staff, and requiring hosts to take additional steps to verify their guests' identities. The incident served as a cautionary tale for those who disregard safety regulations and put others at risk for the sake of a good time. My opinion: I think that many of these cases happened because the victims were not attentive, because somewhere the owner was not polite, where the apartment looked suspicious, and then burglars broke in. If the victims had been a little more attentive, a lot of this would not have happened. But of course, not all stories were the victim's fault. In several cases, the apartment was rented to teenagers, which you should not do unless you trust the person. Learn from other people's mistakes if you don't want to end up in my next video. See you soon. Thanks for watching.